Good afternoon. Welcome to UK Property Talk. This is Charles Kelly Money Tips podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Milan of Customized Financial Solutions, specializing in a holistic approach to taxation, and in particular, inheritance tax planning, Section 24 incorporation, and just generally protecting your assets against the taxman, just like the very wealthy do. They don't pay much inheritance tax, and Milan will explain just why. So welcome, Milan. Great to speak to you again.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Charles.
No problem. And I've met Milan several times at various networking events. He's a very knowledgeable guy. So tell us, start off really with how is it that the very wealthy seem to avoid paying inheritance tax? Like, you hear about the Duke of Westminster, members of the royal family, and yet ordinary people in the middle of that sort of, between the poor and the very rich, seem to get clobbered by things like inheritance tax and all sorts of other tax. How do the rich people avoid that?
Because you're so privileged in English law to have the concept of trust.
Trust.
The Duke of Westminster bought properties in the 1600s when London was a wetland for next to nothing. Now Grosvenor Estates obviously own major parts of Mayfair, Green Park, all those areas. The Duke of Westminster passed away 4 years ago. His 28-year-old son inherited 9.9 billion. He did not pay a pound of inheritance tax. Never will they pay inheritance tax because they use the use of trust. And that's how the wealthy people don't pay tax.
So he inherited 9.4 billion. That's 9,000 million pounds, and he didn't pay any inheritance tax.
No, and never will he.
But the average person leaving a house in London for, say, £1 million to their children could be hit with tax, right? With inheritance tax, if they don't do it correctly.
Well, each of us allowance, I don't go too technical, but you can allowance to say 425 per person. So a married couple is 850. But the ticking time bomb is people own a property in joint names, say husband, wife, or two brothers or two sisters. But they are never advised about joint tenancy, tenants in common. So if you own a property with Mr. and Mrs. Joe Bloggs, that's in joint tenancy, first of all, if one of you passes away, husband passes away, it automatically, according to laws of intestacy, goes to the wife. Yeah. It overrides the will. It overrides your will. It's so no use. Now, in my opinion, 65% of people have it in joint tenancy. So this is one thing you can save inheritance tax. So, for example, £1 million property, for example, you and your wife jointly own the property for £1 million. As soon as you break it in tenants in common, and if you're a happily married couple, it goes to 50% husband, 50% wife. So that's the second tenet of inheritance tax planning. First thing is keeping your legacy. Second is equalization of assets between husband and wife if you're happily married. And the third thing is bloodline planning. Whatever you do, it goes to your children. It doesn't, you can avoid it going to your ex-daughter and ex-son-in-law.
Okay. And so if you change from joint tenancy to tenants in common and one of the husband or wife dies, do they have any problem there? If you've left half of your house to somebody else, could they lose their home? Could they be told to leave the home? Well, then you're leaving. They end up inheriting half the house.
Well, if it's joint tenancy, you don't need a will. The problem starts when you both pass away. That's when the children get top of the inheritance tax.
Yeah.
If it's in tenants in common, you're always advised to have a will, and probably in London to have a tax efficient will. So as long as you're alive, husband, wife, whoever dies, it's a mirror will. It's a mirror will, which is tax efficient. As long as you're both alive, you can do whatever you want. The moment you both pass away, then we use specialist trust, like a property protective trust for main residence, or flexible life interest trust, or barter, depending on about quite a few trusts like that. So then those trusts help minimize the inheritance tax and bloodline planning. You can actually protect against even care fees. So there are a lot of different avenues. So it's quite a complex area, but you can do all this. These things can be put into place,
Okay.
and, according to your needs.
So just go back to basics. What is a trust? And what does
Trust
it
is,
mean, putting your property in a trust?
well, different. The trust is quite big. When you put something in trust, you're removing the legal ownership from yourself. So if you put, I don't know, your life policy in trust, for example, you have a life policy, you're insured for $500,000. You always put into trust. So trust means that the legal ownership goes from you to the trustees. The trustees could be a wife, could be a children. So basically, when you put into trust, you're removing the legal ownership from the individual to the trustees. And then the trustees are in charge, basically. And that you can put a property in trust, you can put a life insurance policy in trust. You can do also, but the trust is quite a complex word. You can have an offshore trust. If you have a wife, if you own a property in your wife's name, not the property, you can have an interest in possession trust to make sure that if you die, your children can't kick your wife out, you know?
Okay. But with your main residence, can you put that also into trust and still live in the property?
No, the advise not to put the main property. You can put the equity into a trust, but you have to. That's a main principle rises. But again, it depends on the situation. Yes, you can put the equity in the trust because in the southeast, you know, London prices have gone up, so you can do that. But it's according to the specific needs. It is a customized, financial, legal, tax efficient, holistic solution specific to you and your company. So it's specific to you. We can tailor a custom-made solution.
Okay, so there's no one fits all solution, a quick fire hit, do this and everything will be okay. You have to look at the person holistically in terms
I can
of
tell
their
you,
tax.
there's a lady, you probably met her yesterday, Pam. She used to work for KPMG. She's a chartered accountant.
Right.
When she was working at KPMG, the Duke of Westminster had a whole department of KPMG working on his affairs. So that's
He had a whole department of KPMG working on his affairs.
For him not to pay the tax legally.
Wow. I can't think of what his accountancy bill must be like. A whole department of KPMG on £1,000 an hour each, or it must be millions, you know.
Well, what about the Queen Mother? I think her advice was not appropriate at the right time. At age 92, she's advised the royal family is pretty well off. You don't need to the Queen, Prince Charles, William, etc.
They're pretty well off, yeah.
Queen Mother give your assets away. At age 92, she gave away £70 million.
Wow.
And she survived 2 months more than the 7 years. 7 years is like after 7 years, you don't pay inheritance. She didn't pay inheritance on 70 million.
She left it a bit late, didn't she, to do that? She
left it a bit late, but she did survive 2 months more than the 7 years. So didn't pay inheritance. Now the other royal connection is Princess Diana. She died tragically. Whatever reason is not important. But you can change your will within 2 years of someone passing away. Anybody can. It's called a deed of variation. You need a specialist team, but anybody can do that.
Sorry, can you just stop there? So you can change your will after somebody dies with a deed of variation?
Within 2 years, yes.
Wow. Well, a lot of people wouldn't know that.
Well, they did for Princess Diana. The royal family, again, no another system.
They get good advice, and which most people don't, right? Most people buy a house, live in it, they die, they pass it to their children. They don't get any advice at all, do they? Most people don't have an accountant unless they're self-employed or running a business.
Well, people give advice, like in accountant, you can have a traditional accountant, but the chartered tax advisors have the real expertise.
Okay.
And it's also experience. I mean, like I said, my IC team, I met Trevor 20 years ago. He's got 50 years experience. They've done 25,000 wills. So, you know, they're absolute experts. And obviously, you know, I work with those caliber of people. And be it for property tax, you know, I've got my specialist team, an IHT team, a trust team, the specialist people. And for me is to coordinate and create that solution for you specific to you. You know?
Right. You mentioned wills there. You know, from my days in financial services, I remember that a lot of people still didn't have a will. And they said, well, it will all go to the children anyway. What's the point of a will, they thought. But you mentioned this, some people will get special advice on wills. Well,
I have a team which can create that, but are you aware that if you don't have a will, and say you don't have any mother, father, child, you're the sole person, unfortunately, the only sole survivor, guess where your wealth goes if you die without a will?
Well, I'd imagine it would go to the state.
No, it goes to Prince Charles.
Sorry, say that again. So,
It goes to Prince Charles.
well,
If you live in Leicester, go to the Duchy of Leicester, whoever. It goes. That's why Prince Charles is worth £1 billion. Doesn't pay inheritance tax. The Queen Mother, the Queen earns about £122 million a year. She's worth about 22 billion. They don't pay inheritance tax.
so Prince Charles is worth £1 billion, doesn't pay inheritance tax. It's just amazing, isn't it? And you say that if people die, what's usually called intestate, without a will, and there's no other, so any survivors or any beneficiaries, that their money goes to Prince Charles.
Yeah, no one he grins all the time. He's grinning all the time.
How does that? I mean, I didn't know this. I mean, I thought he's the Duchy of Cornwall. Is that where it goes to? Or?
Well, he's a very rich duchy. He's worth £1 billion and doesn't pay inheritance tax.
But his wealth must be going up every day as people die.
Yeah, and I mean, also they got astute investments. Obviously, they're all family past assets from generation to generation. It's intergenerational wealth.
Yeah.
The use of trusts, the Duke of Westminster, they said these trusts in 1600s, and they're still running. So that's so unique to English law. But it's only privy, like George Osborne, for example. He decimated.
Former Chancellor.
The former Chancellor. Say, I don't know, 10 years ago, if you had a property earning £1,300 income, your mortgage is £600, your profit would be 1,300 minus 600, roughly.
Right. Yeah.
Now George Osborne has stopped that completely.
Yes.
So whoever's highly leveraged with a big mortgage is stuck. But he himself, again, this is how the wealthy people play the game. He is resident, that means he lives in this country. His domicile, he is British. Like, my father's born in Kenya, so I can claim Kenya domicile. I can't do that now. But he's 100% British. Yet, he is privy to the Osborne and Little Trust. His father is worth hundreds of millions. He doesn't pay any tax. So that's the rule for the wealthy. And you know what? It's perfectly legal. So he's decimated the whole that industry. And yet, he himself is... tax,
You could say that he did a lot of damage to landlords and property people, the small guys, but for the corporates, he's encouraged corporates, and he himself has taken advantage of rules to not pay tax, but he was making the rules himself as the Chancellor.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I've got a property tax team. There is quite a unique solution. You have to be very careful where you get your tax advice from. You can put properties in an LLP if you've got sufficient equity and mortgage on property. You can put an LLP for 2 years or 3 tax years. Then it goes to a limited company. Then all the prices are rebased at the current price. So, for example, you buy 5 properties 100,000 10 years ago. Today they're worth 200,000. Tomorrow, in 3 months, they're worth 220. You can actually put it into a limited company with the current prices without paying stamp duty and capital gains tax. It then provides an equity pot, which you can take at personal rates of tax. And then you can also do some inheritance tax planning by giving growth shares to your children. So there are models there, but you can. But if someone's got, say, 2 barter properties with a high loan to value, so like 75% loan, you can't do anything. You're stuck.
Yeah. So the people with a lot of properties, a lot of money, a lot of equity, and tax planning, they can get out of this, but the average landlord can't. So it's a bit like one rule for them, one rule.
Well, the solution depending. I mean, there are solutions depending on specifically what you need is a good accountant who actually understands property tax.
Yes,
you have to find someone very competent who does that. And
okay.
in my search for this, I've met in excess of more than 10,000 people in finance, tax, and property. I was quite intrigued, like who's giving correct advice and who's not giving such great advice. You have to get a correct advice from the right person. Otherwise, it's not what you make; it's what you pay, what you make after tax.
True.
I mean, I think there's a saying: Benjamin Franklin said, in life, the two sons is death and taxes. Now, I have a lot of respect for Benjamin Franklin, but I don't agree with the death. Death, inheritance tax is a voluntary tax. I think a Labour politician, Roy Jenkins, he famously said, and this is true, if you distrust your heirs more than you distrust Indian revenue, you pay inheritance tax. It is a voluntary levy.
Yeah.
So, and I guess the recent example is Mrs. Sunak. Now she's a daughter of a billionaire. I mean, in the
This is
UK,
Rishi Sunak's wife, who's running for Prime Minister at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, Mrs. Sunak. Now her father is she's daughter of a billionaire, Indian billionaire, Infosys.
Yes.
In this country, when you're wealthy, like Lakshmi Mittal or Abramovich or these very wealthy people, you always claim even Mr. Green, they claim there's non-UK domicile. That means you only pay taxes on your assets in this country.
Yes.
You can pay tax on your worldwide. And before there's no fee, but now they charge 100,000 whatever. But now Mrs. Sunak, she was non-UK. There's nothing wrong with that, because even the wealthy politicians have these trusts in non-UK domicile. But because of politics, for whatever reason was, now, somebody went after Mrs. Sunak rather than because whatever the reason was. Now she's voluntarily agreed to pay tax on a worldwide assets, and she was worth like 700 million. Now, that's wrong, isn't it? I mean,
I think it's wrong because they probably tax the company where the company is as well. So she's probably paying two lots of tax.
No, she voluntarily agreed because she was put in a bit of a pickle. I think I don't want to go too much into it, but it's a political thing. And now, that's why I want to meet Mrs. Sunak, because I can actually help her, because she's paying taxes. She doesn't need to, because, that's
I know, it's true.
So.
You're right, it's true. But I think the average person in business or buying a property will just use an accountant more like a glorified bookkeeper. They just give them their figures and the accountant says, you're going to pay this much tax, and they might give them a few tips, but they don't really sit down and plan what they're going to do for the future, how they're going to plan the year ahead. So they're just like bookkeepers rather than tax advisors. Would you agree with that? I mean,
I think, Charles, one thing you need definitely for an accountant, you need a proactive accountant.
True.
So it's not up to, you saying, oh, can you help me do the structure? They should come back and say, Charles, look, you got this property, or you got to look at scenario, you need to this and that. You need people who are proactive and, who have a tax team. I mean, my tax team, they've been running for 52 years. Dave's been a partner for 40 years. I mean, really? They understand what property tax is, not the cheapest, but the solution does work, and it's integrated. And you have to integrate. Again, it's a customized financial legal tax solution. Although David's got his own big company, but my IHT done through Trevor, he's got 50 years experience. So bringing all the experts together with tremendous experience, stamp duty. How many people are aware that there are 49 ways of saving stamp duty on properties? If you've got a property in the pension, about 10 billion pounds need to be reclaimed. So bringing all these experts, this is where the magic happens. Yeah.
So there are 49 ways of reducing or avoiding stamp duty, including putting your property into your pension scheme. That would be something like a...
Yeah, I mean, if you've got property pension, what happens is that David, the principal, used to lecture at central law training to solicitors, 250 to 300 lawyers, 3 times a month, 7.5 hour seminars on stamp duty. And now, this loophole about this putting a property in the pension, they've actually gone with Baroness Altman to the House of Lords to sign a petition to say that, look, you can claim the stamp duty. Now, I had a client who came to me, an accountant, but taxing went to see him along with myself. We managed to get £19,500 stamp duty back for him. That's a case we've had, and we've had cases like when you buy a plot of land and you build 5 flats, you can say the STLT, you can say the stamp duty is called multiple dwellings relief. There are 49 release and allowances. So there's one is if they're grazing rights for cattle, it's mixed use. If a property, so I have a team of chartered tax advisors. That's all they do is help you with the stamp duty.
Amazing. Good. So you managed to get money back from the revenue after they paid the stamp duty. You still managed to get it back from them.
Yeah.
So it's not too late if you paid the stamp duty and maybe you paid too much more than you need to legally. You can still do something about that and get that back.
You can do it within 1 year up to 4 years. It's a no win, no fee. So if they can't do it, there's no fee. If they can do it and you don't want to go ahead, there's no fee. They only take a fee if they manage to get it done.
Wow.
So
they've got nothing to lose. No win, no fee.
So if somebody buying a property, show me the plan of the property. I introduce you to the tax team, explain how the stamp duty works, and then you've got access to a dedicated team who will answer your questions at no cost to you.
Fantastic. So this is what you've explained there, is how the very wealthy keep their wealth. They keep their wealth intact. I know, for instance, that the family of the Duke of Westminster, they're not just planning for themselves, they're planning for their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They're planning several generations ahead, whereas the average person just thinks about the next few years and maybe them and their children, but they really do plan ahead. And that's how they keep their wealth intact and keep it away from the taxman, using, as you said, trusts and proper wills and getting.
Well, the other example is the Rockefeller family. It's intergeneration. It passes on from generation to generation. The Queen is an excellent example how the royal family passed assets to Prince Charles, Prince Harry, Prince William, and now Prince William's children. They'll pass them on.
I always wonder why they look so happy, because they're not getting bills from the taxman. They're not being chased by the taxman all the time. But seriously, you can get the advice for the people that may not be the billionaires, but they can get that kind of expertise to help keep their wealth, preserve their wealth, and give it to who they want to give it to, not give it to the government, because they paid a lot of tax in their lifetime already.
Yeah, well, Charles, I don't really dwell too much on this, but people need to know why the reason why I do this tax planning. I was fortunate to be born in the richest Asian family in East Africa.
Wow.
We're no longer the richest, but we were in the 60s and 70s. We used to own 6,000 acres of land. My parents were doctors.
Wow.
Born in immense wealth. Unfortunately, lost my dad, unfortunately, tragically, when I was 12. We paid the princely sum of £35,000 inheritance tax in 1977, when you could probably buy a 3-bedroom in Wembley for £4,000. And my uncle stole the whole lot. When I came to this country, I was intrigued. My mother said about trust. That trust has grown tremendously over the years. And I was intrigued how these wealthy people don't pay any tax. So it's good, taking a good 25, 30 years to really understand how the Duke of Westminster, how the Queen, I mean, Prince Harry, so he doesn't have any money, he's going to inherit £7 million from the Queen Mother at age 40. He's got a 15 million trust from Princess Diana. And guess what? His dad's worth £1 billion. I'm sure Prince Charles is going to give him some money. It's absolutely, it's wonderful. I mean,
incredible, yeah.
All the politicians, they've all got their trusts and all of them. George Osborne, David Cameron, Tony Blair.
Yeah, I mean, he's another one.
How much tax do they pay in this country? They use all these trusts and things. Even
the left-wing stalwart Tony Benn, who changed his name from Anthony Wedgwood Benn, he famously talked about tax. The rich should pay their fair share. But when he left his fortune, he used trusts. He didn't pay much inheritance tax. His family didn't pay much inheritance tax. So these people, it's like one rule for them: you do as I say, but not as I do. Well, they take advantage of everything.
Right now, I've got a team. You can have a business account at Metro Bank. You can have a trust bank account at Metro Bank, which they do provide, and you can have a trust, and you can decide how much tax you pay.
So that there is summing it up. You can have a business account, a trust account, and you can decide how much tax you pay by using your services. Yeah.
Yes, and I've got a team, and I've got people actually who are resident and domiciled in this country using the structure. So it's nothing new. And
okay, great. I mean, can you just briefly explain the difference between domicile and residency and non-residency. Can you just quickly give a brief overview of domicile?
Residence is where you live. So we live in the UK. If you live many years, it's ordinary resident. Domicile is where your father's born. So my father was born in Kenya. So when I came to this country, I acquired my father's domicile. Once you stay about 15, 20 years, then you're deemed domicile. If I decide that when I'm 60, I decide to want to go back to my mother country, I can then become domicile back in Kenya. It's quite difficult. But that domicile is something that's the main thing. Now, someone like George Osborne, he is domiciled here. He is British. He can't say I'm Kenyan or Indian, whatever, you know. But this is the thing.
Yeah,
it's a big difference. The domicile is very important where your domicile is.
But you can be non-resident for tax purposes, like Philip Green that you mentioned briefly, that he's back and forth to Monaco. A lot of his assets are in his wife's name. He famously drew, I think, billions in dividends and took some pension fund money out, I think, it's alleged, and didn't pay any tax.
What about the racing driver?
There's Bernie Ecclestone, who's in court at the moment, isn't he? Lewis Hamilton?
I mean, the racing driver.
Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah. I think the racing driver, I can't remember his name. He's in Monaco. They're exiled in Monaco.
Why a lot of them live in Monaco, yeah. The racing driver, maybe Coulthard and...
People are not aware in Switzerland is one country, but it's got different cantons. So if you go there, each canton will look for your business. So I have a young gentleman, I think must be about 25, 30. He's a son of one of my acquaintances. I met him at an event. He said, "Why would I live in the UK? I'm in investment banking. I'm resident in Switzerland. I don't pay much tax, or in Singapore. Why would I want to pay 40% tax? I'd rather live there, pay minimal tax, have a good earnings, manage to keep my earnings. Who knows? He may even come after 15 years and come back to the UK. But here, you're paying 40, 50% tax. But and
even James Dyson, I think, moved to Singapore at one point.
Forget James Dyson, Starbucks, that's a household name. They don't pay much tax.
Yeah.
The myriad of companies, you can go through Ireland, all sorts of things. I mean, even Google, for example, they don't pay much tax.
Yeah, they can pay royalties back to the main company, which could be based in Luxembourg, which is part of the EU, but seems to be a tax haven. And at the moment, the government here has Rishi Sunak actually increased corporation tax, so that's going to further encourage companies to go elsewhere.
One thing is, Charles, I'll be careful what I say, but I went to a property client who's quite well off, and I said inheritance tax is voluntary, you don't need to pay it. His son said, no, we have to pay it. So I said, the Indian Revenue offices are owned by an offshore company. Now, I didn't know who it was. So the father's sitting next to me, but the son was the other side, Googling on his computer. I think it's called Madeline Holdings. And Madeline Holdings, this is Gordon Brown, sold the Indian Revenue offices to Madeline Holdings or Madeline Holdings, I can't remember the name. And guess who owns that? George Soros. So
George
on one hand,
the man who broke the pound.
Yeah. So one hand, they're saying pay your tax in this country. But why did Gordon Brown sell this offshore company, all the Indian to an offshore company?
I don't know. Was that before or after he sold the gold to the Chinese? I don't know.
Yeah, he also sold the gold. But this is Gordon Brown saying, keep everything in the UK, don't pay tax. And he himself is selling the Indian offices to an offshore company. I mean, George Soros owns those offices. So, I mean, how unfair is that?
Now, from a simple point of view, you can just give away assets to your children or grandchildren, and as long as you live 7 years, you would not pay inheritance tax on that. But you can't do that with your main residence while you're still living in it, right?
You can't give it because they bought anti-avoidance before, about 15 years ago.
It's a gift with reservation, I think. Or...
Yeah, it's called anti-avoidance, but basically, gift of reservation. But basically, say you're 70 years old. You say it's a couple 70 years old. Say 10 years ago they decide we want to give a property away, just give to our son, and or daughter, or whatever, and we live in there. You can't do that. Now you have to pay the market rent to your son or daughter.
Yeah.
They change these things. But like I said, it's you have to get the correct tax advice, and the tax laws are changing all the time. So you need to have people who are competent, who are up to date. I mean, the Duke of Westminster will never pay inheritance tax because he's got the right people to advise him correctly.
Yeah, and you hear horror stories of people that give all their money away to their family, and then they get sick, and then the family refuse to give them the private care they need, or just want them out of the house. So you've got to be careful with giving everything to your children, but maybe using trusts is a way where you can still retain some control.
One of the biggest time bomb is if you become mentally incapable in this country, you'll be at the mercy of courts of protection. Your wife cannot look after you. So everybody in this country, even if you're in good health, if you become mentally incapable, like dementia or anything like that, your wife or your loved ones cannot look after you unless you have a financial and property lasting power of attorney and a health and welfare. If you don't, basically you'll be at the courts of protection. The other thing, this happened to my wife's grandmother. The day she died, she was brain dead in the morning, but the heart was beating. So people should have something called a living will.
Yes.
So now, unfortunately, in my wife's family, it's a big family, but the two brothers were asked by the doctors, do you want to fit the machine of now? No son wants to be in that position, or daughter wants a position of making a decision. Fortunately, unfortunately, her grandmother died naturally. But these things, you don't expect that to happen, but you should have these things in place. By not having a will, I think 70% of people don't have a will. Why would you not have a will and determine? A lot of people have children. Who are going to look after children? Say both of you pass away, parents, who's going to look after children? So trustees need to be children,
So you not only need a will for when you die, but you need something called a living will with power of attorney that gives instructions if you ever become incapacitated mentally or physically. So that's another great tip. So how would people get in touch with you if they needed advice? Obviously, you can put your comments in here and you can write to me, but how would you want them to contact you? Or
well, they can contact me by phone. I mean, or by email, info at customer.
I can put your details on the notes then, your email address, and so for tax planning. But I think that's been really interesting today. I hope we can maybe do another session, maybe go into things in a bit more detail. I mean, you mentioned George Osborne there. He is among his 6 jobs, I think, he's the editor of the Evening Standard. And there was a recent article saying about the property market that rich buyers will sustain the London prime housing market. And I believe that the prime housing market will be sustained even if things change. But really, Milan, it's been a fascinating session there on trust and wills and living wills and how to preserve your wealth from the tax man and give it to the people you want it to go to, rather than just dying and then hoping for the best.
One thing, Charles, I want to show.
Yeah, sure.
This is my motivation.
Right.
You can see
Revealed
Prince Charles.
Secrets of,
can
you turn it to the camera a bit? Can you turn it slightly to the camera? Yeah. So it's revealed secrets of the royal purse, Queen, no tax on inheritance, Prince Charles, 1 billion in assets. Okay. Thanks. I've got it. And this motivates you.
This motivates me.
In addition to your own family background.
If they don't pay on 9.9 billion or 70 million, why should we pay inheritance tax? It is a voluntary tax.
Yeah, that's great. That's true. So well, once again, thanks for your time today. And I will put your contact details up on the notes. So whether you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, or listening to it, you'll be able to contact Milan at Customized Financial Solutions and help you with tax planning and keeping your wealth intact for your children and grandchildren. Thanks very much, and have a great day, everybody. But thank you once again to Milan of Customized Financial Solutions. Thank you.